It's been a few months since my last event win, so I thought it'd be fun to talk about my event that I won this weekend just gone. I want to talk about it. I think there's a lot of fun stuff in here about how I played, but also I figured it's a good opportunity to talk about a list that I didn't like, that I didn't write, and what I would have done differently as well. So if you're looking to play Warriors of Chaos, maybe there's some tweaks in here that would interest you. Before we go any further, this video is sponsored by Elmo Miniatures. Elmo Miniatures is run by Lewis. He does the Saffron Slam event, looking at the Saffron Fantasy Slam for Old World here. The event was one of those that we went to this weekend. Next up, we've got the Saffron Fantasy Slam 4, which is a weekend in May, the 10th and the 11th in May. There's one in July, over my birthday actually, the 26th, 27th. One in September, the 6th and 7th of September, and then Lewis is running a Teams event from the 1st and 2nd of November. That is, as I understand it, going to be 6 teams of 4. Really looking forward to that one. Definitely going to try and make it down for the team specifically. One of my favourite things about Lewis's events are the trophies, so I make sure to win every time I go. These are fantastic. Obviously, it's just a nice 3D sculpted bust, but I have plans to maybe take my dwarf off the plinth and use it as some sort of massive dwarf statue unit filler. Not really sure what I'm going to do with that yet, but give it a couple of years' time. I'm sure I'll do dwarves, one of my favourite armies. So look out for some sort of unit filler there. Lewis has been running events for years, and he's brought that experience to the old world. He has plenty of themed boards, some of which you'll see later on in the video, but he just has, it's a great experience, a great vibe. I definitely enjoy going to them, and I'll be going back to as many as I can justify travelling down to Essex for. If you're in the Essex area or can travel to it, check those out. There are also plenty of prizes, something that is maybe lacking from Old World events or just Warhammer events in general. I won't plug all of the sponsors, but I will say Second in Command has very generously sponsored Lewis with army battle boxes. If you use Second in Command to submit your list, one of the players had their list randomly chosen and they won an Orcs and Goblins battalion, which is a very cool prize. In fact, the biggest prize of the evening, so you don't even have to do well to get a prize. There are also prizes for first place, best army in terms of painted and voted for models there, sportsmanship, and I believe there's also a second in command, a wooden spoon prize, I should say. Last but not least, let's have a look at some of the boards. I've only taken a couple of pictures here, really should have taken more, but all of the boards are themed. They come with a QR code on the wall so you can see what each bit of terrain represents. And here we've got some sort of desert board, and there's another one which is like a red sand. There's all sorts. There was a hilly board with plenty of snow on it. There was a standard grass mat as well. A good amount of variety. Unfortunately, I did end up playing on the same board for 3 games, but Lewis asked if I wanted to change boards, and I was happy enough, stood where it was. But a lot of variety with them, would recommend if you like the themed board approach. And if you are a Dirty Bretonian player, don't worry, there was ruling if you didn't have a wood on your board, you would randomly determine one of the pieces of terrain that the Green Knight could come out of. So you weren't handicapped for bringing the Green Knight, even though you probably should be. Let's talk about the list. Now, this list wasn't mine, as I've already said. This was Andy Oak's list. He does have a YouTube channel along with Tom Gold. I will link that down below. If you haven't seen it already, check it out. They do plenty of videos about competitive Warhammer. And the concept is it's a dragon, it's double casters. I think he runs double level 4. I made some tweaks, and then we've got just filling out the rest, and the most important thing is we've got a Warpfire dragon as well. So let's go point by point. So we're starting off with the Chaos Lord, who obviously is our general. I've gone for a great weapon. You could absolutely go flail or something else. It's pretty bare bones. We don't even have points to give it Mark of Nurgle, so gone shield to give it a 3-up save against shooting, on a dragon as well, and then 2 favors of the gods. You can't get much more bare bones than this. You could get it down to 490 flat if you went flail and a single favor of the gods, but we didn't need those points. So we've also got a pair of Sorcerer Lords. Both of them are Tzeentch. Both of them are on a Chaos Steed, because I haven't really got any infantry in this list. Also, both of them are Battle Magic, and both of them have a Spell Familiar, knowing an additional spell. But one of them's a level 4, one of them's a level 3. You might notice this reflects the Throne of Skulls comp that people have been talking about for a little while. So my dragon is under 500 points. I've got a level 4. I've got a level 3. This fits within the sort of restrictions that we might see for Throne of Skulls potentially adding into the game. I'm still waiting for that document to come out. We'll see. I'm waiting. Anyway, so it is sticking to Throne of Skulls comp. This was one of the things that Andy wanted to test, and I've just kind of kept that when I was building around with the list. I thought it was interesting to play with. But you can see we're at 998 points in characters, so we don't really have any wiggle room. I went Mark of Tzeentch on both, which means that I have access to Blue Fire of Tzeentch, which is obviously a very good spell. In this list, I was super underwhelmed by both level 4s. I think if I had upgraded the Chaos Lord to have, I think probably the regen. I like regen more than an Ogre Blade. And then I'd gone for a Sorcerer Lord with the Infernal Puppet and just used some of those spare points to upgrade the 2 characters, dropping the third character, I should say. I think this would have been a significantly better list, but it wasn't, and we had to play with what we had. Core, I like this bus of 10 Chaos Knights. I'd love to give them a mark, but I find that they have too many issues with leadership. If we drop the Sorcerer Lord, and we go to maybe an Aspiring Champion BSB to get some rerolls in there, you could theoretically go for 10 Chaos Knights with Mark of Nurgle, making them a bit more tanky, or Mark of Tzeentch if you wanted to really double down on having the +1 to cast on your wizard. But I think Undivided feels really good. It gives you that reroll against the important psychology tests. I also went for Brazen Collar, which is Magic Resist 2, and Icon of Darkness on my full command. This was fine. I ended up playing against, I think, 3 lists where they didn't really feature any shooting at all that mattered. So the 2 games that it was good in, it was very good in, and I felt good about spending the, 25 points on it? 20 points. 20 points for an additional -1 to be hit from ballistic skill shooting is pretty solid. A couple of units of Chaos Warhounds. As always, these things are MVPs. They're so good. They can provide cover, they can move block, all of that good stuff as well. I had some points, so I gave them both Vanguard, which is always nice if you can give them it. And then the Marauder Horseman. This was kind of the tweak that I made that wasn't... I don't think this was in Andy's initial list, or maybe we talked about this together. So I had 7 Marauder Horsemen. They had light armor and shields and cavalry spears, so that gets them up to a 5 up armor save. They are Mark of Tzeentch, giving them that magic resist, but also, most importantly, if my characters are attached to the unit, they're casting at +1. And yeah, I've gone for Horseman and Musician. No standard bear in there, but that gives me a little bit of protection from challenges. If I ever run away, the Musician gives me an additional buff there. If I need to march out of harm's way, I've got the +1 to do so. So all good stuff there. 1 Dragon Ogre with the Blackened Plate Shartak, which means I've got a 2-up save and a 3-up ward against flaming attacks, which is really nice because most of the things that are going to hit you that are magic, it's going to be Pillar of Fire, it's going to be fireable. So I never made a single 3-up ward save, as in I never rolled one all tournament. But in theory, it's nice. And, of course, the Warpfire Dragon. The Warpfire Dragon is really the MVP of this list, in my opinion. I didn't spring for it to be a wizard. I don't think that's worth doing. You could go level 2 with Battle Magic to pick up Hammer Hand, and then maybe you also get another good spell. But I think that changes the way that you want to play the Warpfire Dragon, and I don't really like that. Basically, my game plan is to march it up next to or nearby my wizard. And why is that? Well, because it's got a whole host of special rules. Comes with magic attack and magic resistance, which is just nice to have. Stomp attacks, it's a dragon, it's got a regen 5-up, it's got a 4-up armor save, so it's still pretty tanky. Statline wise, it's an underwhelming dragon, but it's still a dragon. So, you're looking at weapon skill 6, strength 6, T6, wound 6, only 5 attacks, lower initiative than you might find on a normal dragon outside of High Elves. Leadership's not great, but that's pretty standard across the board for Warriors of Chaos, weirdly enough. You do come with a Mark of Chaos Undivided, which is really nice because it means that you do get to reroll leadership tests if you need to on the Panic Fear. Well, you wouldn't be taking Fear or Terror, but Panic if there was ever a reason to take that. You also get a few other things here. So if we go with Explosive Demise first, when you die, you blow up and you take D6 Strength 5 hits with AP 2. The first time I rolled this, I actually thought it was AP 1, so it's even better than I expected it to be. You've also got the Warpfire Aura, models within 3 inches and not permitted a ward save while within 3. This is nuts. This is why, in my eyes, you can get away with taking the Chaos Lord without a dragon and still being the baddest motherfucker on the planet. It's because you've got a 375 point model that contextually is it's like an item upgrade for your Chaos Lord, because you're going to fly around, charge in with your Chaos Lord, march the Warp Fire Dragon, so you're not within 3 of your dragon, but you're within 3 of theirs, turn off the ward save, win all your combats. It's incredible. You can also charge the enemy in the flank, depending on your positioning, still be outside of 3 of you and inside of 3 of them, depending on, again, just how things line up. It's really solid. If you can add the combat res and also turn off the ward saves, you're in a really, really good spot. Finally, it does have one last rule, which I'm struggling to find on here. It doesn't seem to be listed. Basically, if you are hit by magical or flaming attacks, you get a 5-up ward save. So this does have a conditional 3 saves, which is pretty nuts, honestly. It's really solid. The other thing it has as well that I didn't actually use all tournament, I think I rolled it a couple of times, but it always scattered off. So I never dealt damage with this. But you've got a stone thrower, which is, 6 to 24 inch range, so it's not that long, but it is, strength 8, AP 3, D3 plus 1, multiple wounds. Some matchups, you could just plink away at their dragon potentially all game. It gives you options. Like I say, I found that I marched a lot instead of doing anything else. On to the games. First of all, I was playing against Jim, and Jim was playing a little bit of an atypical High Elf list, and he was aware. We talked about how in his play group, a lot of the things they'd been doing were playing without monsters, so they'd had quite a fun, balanced game there where infantry were a lot more important. But he'd realised that he probably did have to bring one. So his list here was double level 4, a pair of Archmages, one on foot with the sort of Heoth, triple Obsidian Lodestone for magic resist 3, high magic, and it was bunkered in a big unit of Swordmasters. Then the other one, we had a second Archmage, which was level 4, Ogre Blade, Silvery Wand for that 5th spell known, Blood of Calidor, which I think is a mistake, and it did cost Jim in this game. But Illusion, so we're going for Spectral Doppelganger here. The idea being that you've just got this badass who can float around and do an incredible amount of damage. The reason that he went for Blood of Calidor, I should point out, is that he gets the free full plate and also a 6-up ward. And then when you're riding a Barded Elven Steed, you've got a 3-up armor save with a 6-up ward because of the Blood of Calidor. You also get up to weapon skill 6. The downside is that you do lose your ability to control your model with a 360-degree line of sight and Impetuous. So could be a little bit of an issue. Speaking of Impetuous, there was a Noble on a Sun Dragon, triple save. So we've got the Blood of Calidor again for Impetuous and also giving you a 6-up ward save. Free full plate paired with the Dragon Helm and a shield, which takes you up to 2-up armor save. Seed of Rebirth for a 5-up ward save. Only a Sun Dragon, so your weapon skill, strength 5, I think you've got 4 attacks. It's a pretty poor imitation of a dragon, but it's also 321 points. So if all you want to do is hold up your enemy dragon, it's not bad. It kind of tanks surprisingly well, because you're going to have a 2-up save if you use your hand weapon. You're going to have a 5-up ward, or 6-up ward with a single 2-up ward from the Opal Amulet, and then a 5-up regen. You're going to stick around for an upsetting amount of time if your opponent's trying to kill you with a dragon, so that's pretty good there. Finally, there was the Noble General, who had a Sword of Heoth for free, Warden of Saffron, built in 10 points there, giving you a couple of rules. Basically, just a survivable general, which is interesting. I wonder if this would have been better if it was a BSB. But yeah, no, it's a fun list, and I'm hoping this is sort of the direction that the game heads towards. Into core, there were 4 units of Elven Archers with longbows, just good chaff that you can put down as your first drop, do some shooting, really solid there. A unit of 6 Silver Helms with full command, no Ruby Ring of Ruin, no Ring of Fury, because this is before the High Elves officially have their rules released, but I was pleasantly surprised at how well this unit did, honestly. 5 Illyrian Reavers, paid to have Scouts and Skirmish with a unit champion as well. They had the Cavalry Spears and the Short Bows. I'm permanently underwhelmed by them, but I think they're worth bringing in most lists. And then 5 Elven Spearmen as well. I think this was just, again, like the Archers, a cheap drop to put down, but maybe Jim didn't have more Archers to put in the list or something like that, because he did need to get above that core. Finally, Specially had 5 Dragon Princes and the Piece de Resistance, the 18 Sword Masters of Heoth. One of the things that Lewis did that I quite enjoyed was a whole host of custom missions. And they weren't custom missions in the way that you might be like, oh, well, there was loads of objectives and stuff. These were mostly rulebook missions, but with some tweaks. And coming from 40k, we, Lewis and myself, have both played a lot of missions on Diagonal, and I quite like that it changes the feel of the game without necessarily having to add a lot of rules. So this was the regular route them special rule, where if you get your opponent below 25%, they do lose the game, with an uncapped army length as well, or the uncapped game length, I should say. But it was at a diagonal, so we still had, I want to say it was a 21-inch gap between the two here, but it just meant that we had a little bit more interesting approach, and the terrain had been specifically set up to, make it so that it made sense for these here. Just wanted to point out, I think this is something that more TOs probably want to play around with. Obviously, there's a lot of talk of comp at the moment. I'm not really sold on comp myself. However, you could just, play some slightly different armies. If you want to promote infantry, make it so infantry have better scoring or something like that. Various different things to do. And here we go, as you can see, just you don't auto win. Basically, you get an additional 200 points if you rout your opponent's army, which it got very close for me and my opponent. Both of us were near to routing each other, but we'll talk about that one as we get through. Here is my deployment for game one. Something to point out is this event did not have a painting requirement. You had to be fully base coated at the very least. Those models there have been undercoated black and grey in a zenithal. They do look more grey than white or black, but that is just how I undercoat my models for painting, unless I'm using yellow. You can see a couple of wizards at the back there in yellow as well. But yeah, so I was deployed with the Warpfire Dragon behind the wall in case there were any shenanigans that my opponent could try and bring. And then once I'd sort of baited out some early drops, I just put my dragon on the line, put my knights on the line, and said, I'm coming to get you. That was the... it wasn't a lot of depth to the deployment in this one, I think. I do want to point out Jim's models were beautiful. I really enjoyed looking at them. He did take a little bit of ribbing from Lewis about the power swords that his models have. I think Jim being a local to Lewis's gaming club, I believe, and also the power sword style effect, as you might see from 40k, I think they're beautiful. I might have to pick these up when I do some sword masters myself, so I'm going to keep that one in mind. But yeah, it was a really lovely army. I think I've got a couple of pictures in here. Oh no, let's go back. Got a couple of pictures in here just where you can see the quality of Jim's models, and I want to say that Jim was put up for nomination for Best Painted as well. Truly deserved. Really like the bases as well that we've got in here. Coming into the game, I got the first turn roll-off, and I honestly played a little bit like a lemon for the first couple of turns, and I made my life a lot harder for myself than it should have been. Jim was solid. When I looked at the list, I thought that the game was going to be easier than it was. I made some mistakes, but also Jim played his list very well, I thought, which is, it's very interesting in Old World. In 40k, if you look at someone's list and they've got a lot of non-optimal choices, as in not having a top-level dragon, as you might say, for high elves, you can tell whether the game's going to be more difficult or not. In this case, Jim was playing a less sort of typical army with some non-optimal choices, as in he's going for a lot of infantry, but he then played that army really well, and it was a surprisingly difficult game, especially because of the blunder that I made early on, I should point out. So going into turn one, I got the roll off. I went first, and my army, as you can see here, basically just full sent forwards. What I did was I marched the dragon up, tried to do Arcane Urgency. Both of my wizards, I believe, had Arcane Urgency. Didn't get it off, which is upsetting. So I ended up being, just planted off to the side a little bit away from my opponent. But I don't think I've got a picture of it. Yes, you can see here, basically I was just over down to the left in this bottom corner, and there were some dragon princes over here. More on that in a second. The Warpfire Dragon moved up to the center of the board as well, because I wanted to charge turn 2. I wanted to threaten as many things as possible with my charges, and just try to get out in as much distance as possible. I full marched the Shaggoth here as well, but outside of charge range of the Silver Helms, and my opponent basically just spent 2 turns with taking some pot shots and doing some incidental damage. I think a couple of Chaos Knights died to a little bit of incidental damage. Here's the thing. As you can see from here, these Dragon Princes aren't dead, and they should have been. What I did was I put my Lord on Dragon in front of them. They failed their Impetuosity test. Great. And then I realized that I'd moved some Marauder Horsemen up into, their charge range. This was a big blunder because I had forgotten about drilled. Basically, I'd measured to make sure that the Dragon Princes couldn't get through past the dragon, but I'd completely blanked on the fact that with drills they'd be able to reform down to 3 wide and then charge the Marauder Horsemen. What I ended up having to do was flee with the Marauder Horsemen, who immediately went off the board. This was better than being caught because it meant that the Dragon Princes weren't facing a way that was problematic for me. And it meant that when I came into my turn 2, I was able to, pin models in. That's one of the downsides of playing a full infantry army, is when your opponent's got a very fast army, they can just dictate the pace of the game and they can get the charges in that they want. So here, the Dragon Princes had charged past me. I'd had to flee, but they'd got out of harm's way, because what would have happened is I would have killed them with the dragon, I'd have overrun forwards, I'd have tested to restrain down here, and then on my second turn, I'd have been able to charge something. Instead, my dragon didn't end up in combat until turn 3, which slowed down the scoring for it, which is, no one's going to cry tears for me, but it was a real blunder, and it could have cost me the game. As you can see as well, the Warpfire Dragon is positioned. This is my turn 2. I've had to move my dragons a second time to get them in. They weren't in charge range, unfortunately, and the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth was out of range. Jim had done some pre-measuring to make sure that I wasn't going to be able to charge him, so I just parked my Shaggoth in front of the Silver Helms and went, come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. I'm T4, I've got a 2-up armor save. You're probably not going to kill me. Something that was fun was this building here was garrisonable, so Jim did have 5 archers in there all game, which was neat. Not something that you see a lot, but and it didn't have an impact on the game, but it was just a nice little bit of flavour. And the dragon is stood over here on the backside, just trying not to charge off impetuously. So it's there as the backup plan. What did happen coming into Jim's turn 3, because, sorry, I've remembered Jim did go first. Jim's Archmage here failed its impetuous test, and unfortunately, because he did have Silver Helms blocking him from getting out, I had killed some of the Silver Helms with a Pillar of Fire. That Pillar of Fire meant that the Archmage here was able to charge, which meant that when it failed its impetuous test, it had a cursed choice. It could either charge into the Chaos Lord here, or it could charge into the Warpfire Dragon. Neither of those choices is good. Jim decided to go for the Warpfire Dragon, and I think the next picture is, yes, a really lovely painted Archmage on its way to its demise. So it charges in, it does no wounds. Obviously, with it being magical attacks from the Ogre Blade, I want to say Jim didn't even get the spell off. I didn't even have to roll to dispel. And then I think he did 1 wound with his rolls, and then I saved it on the ward save, something along those lines. But between all of the difficulty in getting the wounds through and my ability to save it, nothing happened. I turned around and crushed it into a fine paste, because all it had was a 3-up armor save and a 6-up ward. And Archmage no more. I'm just stood in front of your Swordmasters, ready to have a party, basically. From there, the Silver Helms on Jim's turn also charged into the Dragon Ogre here, and I was like, yeah, no, it'll be fine. You're wounding me on 3s, I'm saving on 4s, then I've got 4 attacks back at you and a couple of stomps. I'm going to win this combat handily. Yeah, I got destroyed. I got absolutely ruined. Between the 6 attacks, so I challenged, Jim refused the challenge, went to the back. This is still something that people disagree on. I'd love to see Games Workshop clarify whether you can or not go to the back. I don't have strong feelings on it, so I'm kind of happy to go whichever way my opponent tends to feel on this one. But the Silver Prince champion went to the back, so there was only 5 attacks coming into me and also 5 horses. Jim did 3 wounds to me through my 2-up armor save, and the fact that he was hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s. I was like, okay, sure, that's not great, but I'll do some wounds back. I roll my attacks, I fully whiff, I don't hit at all. I think I got a 1-1-1-3 or something like that. Then I get run down because I genuinely flee. I'm double outnumbered. Oh no, I wasn't double outnumbered. I just rolled high. Warriors of Chaos have a bad leadership. And yes, I run away, I get caught by the Silver Helms, who are suddenly positioned in the flank/rear of this very blurry unit of Chaos Knights in the background. I'll have to see if I've got any pictures of the Chaos Knights, because they're something that I painted 15 years ago or so. When those initial models came out, I painted them with silver spray paint, or no, probably base coated them with silver and then painted them with layers of washes in a early contrast style. So I'll have to see if I've got some pictures of them that you can see. Seeing that my dragon was wreaking havoc, this is coming into Jim's turn 3 now, I believe, or maybe even 4. The dragon has come in, has charged something small, killed some spearmen, and the dragon is there to prevent it from killing other things. Unfortunately, the Warpfire Dragon, with its charges and Terror Causer, end up making the archers in front of the Swordmasters run away, which Jim was trying to, stagger, so he had a little bit more time before they got killed. My Warpfire Dragon did get into them next turn and make light work of them, which was upsetting / fantastic for me. Obviously, they have the ability to become ethereal through high magic, but I've got a dragon that has magical attacks, and magical stomps make light work of T3 models with only a 5-up armor save, let me tell you. This here was, a very dark picture. They have a lot more color on them than you can see. But this was, funnily enough, where I felt the most confident coming into this turn. I had charged some... the Dragon Princes had charged me. They'd whiffed. I'd done enough damage to kill 2 of them. They'd fled. I'd overrun into the spearman. Comes into Jim's turn, and Jim charges me in the flank here and in the rear with some Silver Helms and Illyrian Reavers. And I looked, and I was like, cool, I've got you exactly where I want you. I had a 5-up ward save from the Oaken Shield, and that just meant that he effectively bounced. I killed the spearman at the front for some nice combat res. My Sorcerer Lord on the side killed a couple of Illyrian Reavers. In the back, I think I killed 1 or 2 Silver Helms as well. I won massively on combat res, and I think this picture's quite blurry. Yes, there we go. I did take some very quick snaps, but as you can see here, everyone's running away who's still alive, with the Dragon Princes behind me. This is where they're set up ready to go for some damage. And as you can see in the backside as well, my dragons made pretty short work of the infantry. So here they are positioned to try and get into the big points dense mess over on the left hand side, but also potentially picking up some spearmen or archers on the way as well. And that was the end of game 1. It was a 19-1 win, but it was a surprisingly close game. As I said, if I'd not given my opponent somewhere else to charge those Dragon Princes, it would have been a much closer game. But it ended up being despite me having a huge points lead, it was because all of my points dense units were alive, even though it was only I think there was 1 Chaos Knight alive at the end, which meant that Jim only got about 80 points from that unit, which is a little bit heartbreaking for how many points you put into them, especially with the characters as well. So that was game 1, feeling good about that one. Came into game 2, and game 2 was against a chap called Tom. So I do want to preface this. All my games were good. I enjoyed all of them. I didn't have any sportsmanship issues. I did have a moment in this game where I felt a little hard done by, and I'm not really going to go into depth about it because Tom and I had a very giving game. I offered him a couple of takebacks. He offered me a couple. I don't think I took them because it was like I'd forgotten to move my Vanguard Warhounds. The only way I'm going to learn is if I punish myself by not taking that. But, this wasn't a game of gotchas. I think it was just we disagreed on something. So that did end up with me losing the game. There's not a huge amount to talk about in this one, but this was a very narrow map. In fact, let me tab over and show you. This was the Walden encounter, and basically the way it works is you could deploy 12 inches away from your opponent. Again, diagonal, quite fun. What it means is you've got really deep deployment zones, so you could comfortably deploy back from your opponent if you don't want to risk getting charged turn 1. But also, if you do get charged turn 1, if you wanted to shoot or charge them, you had to pass a leadership in the first turn, leadership test. If you failed, you don't count as having shot or declared a charge. So I believe the intent here is that you could just move as normal. That's how my opponent and myself played it. We agreed before the game. And also, if you kill a unit in melee in the first round, you got an additional 50 victory points, which didn't happen. So basically, we had a very chess-like game. It was good. It was a lot of thinking in that one. I didn't remember to take many pictures on this one, admittedly, which is a shame. But this is at the end of my turn 1, I believe, before my opponent gets to go. Basically, what happened was we were deployed diagonally. My opponent had put his infantry down, so it was out of range of the knight's charge, and I had slightly less drops. I put down my Dragon Lord, and because my dragon has a longer charge range, I knew I was going to be able to get into either of these infantry. In fact, sorry, I had the second last drops. And then my opponent, Tom, put down the Sorcerer Prophet. Really nice models. These are like proper, actual Forge World models. I think one of them was a 3D print, so one of the cannons was normal, one was a 3D print, and it was interesting to have a look at the differences between them. But yeah, a lot of real, genuine resin here. This must have cost an arm and a leg, and a really nicely painted army as well, so huge fan of that. Tom had used his Sorcerer Prophet here to defend against my dragon, basically. So he made it so it was very difficult for me get a charge into the Black Orcs turn 1. We did plenty of sort of measuring, and it was one of those where you get to the end, you're like, I agree, I see what you're trying to do, I'm absolutely fine with it, let's not micromanage any further. I agree that I can't charge the Black Orcs in this angle, or something along those lines. So turn 1, I charged into the Sorcerer Prophet on Bale Taurus with my dragon. I know that the Bale Taurus is not a particularly offensive pick unless it is going to be casting its buff spells, which means that on its own turn, it can hit real hard, but on your turn, it doesn't. And it also isn't going to have Storm of Ash, because I got the first turn, I passed my leadership test, I decided to go in and see if I could kill the Sorcerer Prophet turn 1. The way I did it was I marched my my Warpfire Dragon in as well to turn off its ward saves. I did have to turn off my own ward saves. There was no way for me to do it without getting it in range of both, but that's fine. Again, as I said, I wasn't super worried about damage coming my way. Came in, I actually kind of whiffed my rolls. It is T7, but it's T7 with a 3-up armor save and only a 5-up ward save, which again, I did turn off. So I was expecting to do a lot more. I think I only did a couple of wounds to it, which was a real shame. I thought I could do more and potentially run it down. Obviously, it does have stubborn, so it did pop stubborn, and I overran into the Black Orcs. But that I felt good about how this turn 1 went. Part of the reason I felt good about it is a lot of the measuring had been done with the Black Orc Chariot, because Tom didn't want me to be able to charge it turn 1. So he did a lot of positioning to make sure that this corner here was out of 19 inches of my dragon, because obviously dragons have a good long charge range. And the way he'd done that meant that he wasn't going to be able to charge me in the flank here. So I was feeling, again, pretty solid about my positioning. Looking at Tom's list, it was, I'd say, a fairly standard Chaos list, but I play a lot against Tom Carley, who also quite likes the double Iron Demon list, so I'm quite experienced in this sort of setup. Tom's gone for a Sorcerer Prophet, level 4, with 5-up ward from the Talisman of Protection, plus 1 toughness from Mantle of Stone, getting up to T7. Armor of Silvered Steel for a 3-up armor save. Demonology, obviously you are dry rolling your spells. Tom did get the best spells here. That's not in any way like a knock or a whinge. I'd much rather play against the list performing as it should do, because it's more beneficial to get that sort of practice. But the reason you don't take a Lore Familiar is it means that you wouldn't be able to take the Cloud of Ash or Storm of Ash, which is your signature spell, giving you a 9-inch bubble of -1 to hit for enemy models, which is a really important part of how this list plays. So relatively tanky, in fact incredibly tanky. Darkforged weapon as well. In this game, Tom rolled the D3 damage. I don't think it came up, but it's 10 points. You may as well give it a go if you've got the spare points there. The requisite Black Orc War Boss. Tom had gone for the Boar Chariot, which is interesting. It's got a little bit more combat res in that it comes with a standard. He'd gone for the Dead Hard armor to get him up to T6 and give him full plate. And then he's got the Trollhide trousers as well, and a shield, taking you up to a 2-up armor save if you need to, Charm Shield for a 1-up ward save, and the Collar of Zorga for War Beasts being -1 to hit you. Normally you see the Idol of Gork, which is just a native -1 to hit you overall, but that doesn't work with the points if you want to go for the Dead Hard armor. We did talk about why I didn't go with the Wyvern, and it's immune to Killing Blow. You get more attacks from the Chariot. Obviously, the impact hits are really good. So, yeah. And honestly, I was reasonably impressed by the Chariot. So, maybe one that I'll have to bring to Tom Carley, see if he wants to mess around with that. Core, there's a unit of Infernal Guard because you have to. They did have the War Banners, so they had a reasonable amount of combat res. 12 Black Orcs with some shields and great weapons, using that mob rule to great effect. The boss had an enchanted shield just in case it matters. The Angry Lad's flag as well, and Standard Bearer to give them frenzy. So if you do manage to get a charge or a follow-up, you're hitting them for, I guess not a follow-up. A charge or a follow-up. You are getting that 3 attacks with the Furious Charge and the frenzy. And then, of course, 10 Hobgoblin Cutthroats, just cheap chaff to put down first, and 2 Iron Demons with Hellbound. This gives them a once per game reroll one of the artillery dice, also gives them a 6 up ward against non-magical attacks, so just adds a lot of tankiness to an already tanky unit, and I really like this loadout. This is when I was playing around with Chaos Dwarves as well. 2 flying beasts, or 2 tanky characters, and then 2 tanky Iron Demons is kind of it makes a lot of sense. It's a play pattern that makes sense, and it looks good on the table. Those Iron Demons look fantastic. Back to the game, Tom had deployed quite conservatively the Iron Demon on the right flank directly behind the warriors, making it so that they did have room to give ground, but they weren't going to go very far. There was also the Black Orcs here and the Iron Demon on the left-hand flank. So by the end of my turn 1, or the start of Tom's turn 1, he was locked in combat here, but he wasn't too worried about anything, and he had obviously a lot of mobility to get around. Didn't take too many pictures of this game. In fact, that's the only one that I took, along with this one here. Basically, my chaff in this game doesn't want to be anywhere near those Iron Demons, so I was keeping off to the sides, using them to pick up the very valuable 30 points of the Hobgoblins. But because they didn't die as well, I ended up scoring some decent points. This game, basically, it was an attrition slog. Chaos Dwarves are an army that make it very hard for you to kill them, between the layered saves that they can bring, the high toughness, and the malices to hit. And I ended up in a situation where my dragon was in combat with an Iron Demon. An Iron Demon can do a surprising amount of damage to you. Here and there, it adds up over time. And I ended up with only 4 wounds remaining on my dragon. The Iron Demon was also pretty low, so I was feeling comfortable about killing it. I'd move some Wolf Riders up to block the chariot from moving into it. This was where the disagreement came in. Basically, I'd moved them too close. They had then had to be shifted backwards. In my mind, I had plenty of room to prevent them from prevent the chariot from wheeling and charging the dragon. But by the time we came round to the chariot's move, at that point it was too late to go back and check whether I did have the movement. I maybe should have been a bit more precise with where they were, / been more clear about what I was trying to do, because I didn't feel like I could, in good conscience, argue that actually, no, I've made it clear that they're here to block the chariot. So the chariot charged into the back of the dragon, ended up killing him, and that ended up snowballing the game out. So I just want to point out again, I don't feel hard done by here. I think this was probably a communication issue on my end more than anything else, but that was the thing that caused me to have a real difficult time in this game. Even if that hadn't gone the way that it had, I'd taken a lot of incidental damage on the dragon. I kept taking wounds, rolling a little bit under average. I wasn't particularly unlucky, but I was only on 4 wounds by this point, and I feel like I probably should have been around 6 or 7. You fail a couple more saves than you expect to multiple times, and you go, oh, hold on. This doesn't feel particularly great. So I think I was going to have a difficult time in this game anyway, but I probably could have pulled it back to like a 14-6 loss, maybe, or if I was very lucky and my opponent ended up, failing a lot of saves there, bring it back to a tie or a close win. So the score, it was 1-19 to Tom, and that felt rough. I didn't, I'd come to this event definitely with the plan of trying to win it. And this felt like it was going to be difficult for me to come back from. On to round 3. This was a particularly fun mission, the Escaping Mandeville. So this is Command and Control with a little bit of a twist. At the start of both battle rounds, start of both players' rounds, the command objective in the center, which is just a standard 40 mil circle base or something like that, moves in a 2d3 in a random direction. We found in my game that we didn't actually end up moving all of that much, and my opponent, incredibly lovely chap, he was my vote for sportsmanship, and spoiler, ended up taking it by the end. He was the most sporting player overall, really deserved, really lovely guy, was playing Demons of Chaos, a near full Slanesh list, and it was a really fun list, And after the game, we talked about how we might be able to tweak it to make it a little bit better. But yeah, no, it was fun. It was lovely. I think he was also submitted for Best Painted as well. So I think I might have got some nice pictures as well to show you of his army. Just, it's always nice to see a themed army, even if that does make you suffer a little bit on the tabletop, especially when you're playing demons and you're already suffering a little bit on the tabletop. Joe's list is 100% Slaanesh-ish. One of the demon princes is Tzeentch, and it made sense because, you know, if you've got a Tzeentch caster, it's a lot more reliable than a Slaanesh caster. You don't have the luxury of taking Lore Familiar, so I think this was a very reasonable change to make. And it was modelled like a Slaanesh demon prince, just keeping in with the, you know, the look of the army. There was never any risk of getting them confused because the actual demon prince of Slaanesh was bunkered inside of the unit of demonettes, which is something that I've seen a couple of people talk about. I really liked it. I thought it was a fun build, and it was surprisingly effective, actually. I will talk about that one as we go through. So, top to bottom, we had a Demon Prince of Slaanesh with Aether Blade, which means that you ignore all armor saves with your hand weapon. Demon of Slaanesh gives you a little bit extra charge range, and then heavy armor just built in as well. We had the Tzeentch caster, which is level 4. Twin heads, so you know, 5th spell. You have fly as well, and dark magic. If you're going for a caster that isn't inside a unit and you want to buff, Dark Magic is the way to go. Battle Lust is obviously a very good spell. Gives you a lot of flexibility or a lot of punching power. Something that these models struggle with is the ability to convert those attacks into actual damage. So their honestly mediocre weapon skill is quite nice to get extra attacks and extra hits out of those with the rerolls. There was also a Herald of Slaanesh, which was on an Exalted Seeker Chariot with Demonic Robe, so you can never be wounded on a 2. Demonic Locus as well, which is your battle standard bearer. Means that you get to reroll the instability. I believe you remove 1 from the amount of wounds you take as well. Didn't end up coming up, which you'll see why in a second. Into core, there are a couple of units of Seekers. I really like Seekers. Seekers are fast. They can get out of charge arcs. They hit reasonably hard with 3 attacks per model. They're just solid for the points. You know, 105 points for 5 with no upgrades is not bad for the what you get out of them, as long as you can keep them safe. There was a unit of 15 Demonettes of Slaanesh with full command and the Rapturous standard. So if you charge the front, it was, I believe, a disordered charge, very similar to the dwarf unit that can do the same thing. What this means is Slaanesh has a high initiative. So if you charge the front of a unit with this, the Demon Prince that's inside is going to be hitting first, and it hits pretty hard. Also, 5 Furies. We talked about this as well. Khorne would be better, but it was not really in keeping with the theme. And there was a unit of Fiends. These are great. They give strike last, and they have a decent, like, they hit reasonably hard alongside a couple of different chariots, a Hellflayer and a Seeker chariot as well. This is the only mission, I believe, where I attached my sorcerers to the Marauder Horsemen, because they're on different, they're heavy cavalry, and the Marauder Horsemen are regular cavalry. I can't join them in skirmish, which is a little bit of a shame, but it does mean that if I want to get the benefit from the +1 to cast, I just have to bunk them in. I said to Joe, and this was unfortunate, I didn't tech my list to beat Demons of Chaos. I don't think Demons of Chaos need teching to be beaten. However, if I tried to, I couldn't write a list that was better to beat you, and you'll see why in a second. Very unfortunate that this list matches up so well with Demons. Basically, my 2 wizards, both of them rolled both of their direct damage spells, so for the first time, in fact, the only time across the entire event, I had 6 direct damage spells in double Fireball, double Blue Fire of Tzeentch, and Pillar of Fire. Other than that, I just deployed Dragons on the line, full send. Didn't feel like there was a lot of complexity needed in this game. And I forgot to do my Vanguard moves. I did remember tomorrow. Day 2, I was very good about my Vanguard, but day 1, I was horrendous at it. Over here, you can see Joe's army as well. Nice and pink. We've got some Seekers of Slaanesh on either flank. The BSB is in the top left up here, alongside the Tzeentch Demon Prince that is not in a unit, but just hiding away. There's the unit of Demonettes here with the Keeper / Demon Prince in there. I think it's a Keeper model, but it was a Demon Prince, one of the old Keeper models. Some Harpies at the front, the Fiends as well, and another chariot on the flank. So pretty straightforward. Joe was finding it difficult to fit his entire frontage in, which I thought was quite interesting, given that you don't normally play a diagonal. It's quite a short diagonal. It's a little bit more forgiving than Mountain Pass, but a lot less forgiving than Dawn of War. So coming into turn 1, I went first, and I think this shows correctly. This is after turn 1. Basically, I just marched my dragons forwards. As you might expect, putting my dragons in front of the things that I wasn't worried about them being killed by. And yeah, you can see here they are right next to each other, and the Warpfire Dragon is incredibly positioned to turn off ward saves. Okay, so that's the only pictures that I've got here. My turn 1, I walked up Arcane Urgency'd the unit of Marauders so I could get in magic missile range. I killed the Hellfire Chariot that's up here in the top left, and then I killed all but one of the Seekers, and I killed... and then I went to Joe's turn 1. I bounced my Pillar of Fire through my dragon that was directly in front of these Harpies, killed 4 of them, did a wound myself, which was surprising. I wasn't expecting that. But, you know, the Pillar of Fire was just then in the back line, so it was really difficult for Joe to deal with. So he was already starting from an uphill, it was an uphill battle from the off. And the reason that Joe got my sportsmanship is, despite it being, I think, immediately obvious how difficult of a game this was going to be for him, he was cheering upbeat the whole way through, which is always lovely. I think that's a mark of good sportsmanship. When you're being beaten, you're also fun to play against. But he did feel like he had to do something, so he did charge me. You can see here I've taken a wound from one of my Pillars of Fire, which is just behind the wing of the Warpfire Dragon here. And yeah, the Demon Prince went in. Joe didn't declare a challenge. I did, to make sure that the Demonettes didn't hit me as well, because they were fully buffed. They were... I was double debuffed. I had been... not battle-lusted, what's the word I'm looking for? Wood-paned, and I'd also been hit with the Zinch spell, which is -1. I think it was toughness and initiative he went for, something along those lines. But I was down to T4. I wasn't very strong. I think I was at strength 5 in those realms. So it was the best chance that a Demon Prince had to beat a dragon. And he did 3 wounds. However, I did some wounds back. I fell back in good order. Joe chased me up, and then it kind of just crumbled from there. But across the 2 rounds of combat that Demon Prince ended up in combat with me, I was a little worried because I took 3 wounds twice. I ended up going down to 3 wounds because of the one I took from the Pillar of Fire, just from 2 rounds of combat with the Demon Prince, before I then stepped on it and went, no, absolutely. You've had your fun. How dare you try and kill me? I'm a dragon. And from there, the game sort of just collapsed, and I picked up all of the pieces. This was brutal, I will say, from a points perspective. Joe tallied up the points at the end. He was like, you've got 2,250 points or whatever it was. And I said, yes, you've got 35, because he'd managed to kill 1 unit of dogs, I believe it was. But it was, like I say, good game, lovely opponent. Would play again, even if he'd played something that matched up better into my list. That was the end of day 1. 2-1, I'd had a 19-1, a 1-19, and a 20-0. So despite having had a resounding drubbing in round 2, I ended up having a pretty decent score. I think I came in 4th at the end of day 1, something along those lines. A 2-1 score, and then I had, 40 points out of the possible 60. So wasn't doing too badly. I was pretty okay with that. But it was going to be difficult. Because of the size of the event, there was only going to be 1 player who had the potential to be undefeated at the end of day 1. At the end of day 2, I should say. So when I was thinking about my path to victory, I realized that there was a world where I could actually still win the event. And basically what it boiled down to was the 3 undefeated players, Pip, Nicholas, and Tom. Someone had to beat Tom, because I'd lost to Tom, so I couldn't face up against Tom again. Then, whoever beat Tom, who was going to be 4-0, I had to beat them, and I had to beat them by a good margin, because that 119 had ruined my score a little bit. So, coming into it, that was the goal. I was hoping, start of day 4, I play into whoever it is that is, one of the undefeated players, so I can knock them out of the running and bring myself back into contention. It's one of the very few times that I've wanted to be paired up. It's normal that you'd be like, let's take the easier games. But in this case, knowing that I had a limited path to victory, I did want to get paired up, which didn't happen. I ended up getting paired into another local, a very lovely chap called Ian Payton, who I believe is a member of the channel, in fact. When I mentioned that I'd had, a good result in my game in the VIP section on Discord. Ian then commented, fortunately, wasn't shit talking him. Not that I'd do that, but it would have been awkward. Ian also put some money behind the bar for everyone in terms of paying off their tab for, drinks and sundries, which was really lovely. And I just thought something that should be mentioned because, it's nice to see people taking a more active step in supporting the community that they're playing in. And it was lovely. Day 2 was going to be a struggle. As soon as I saw that I was matched into Ian, I knew it wasn't the end of the world. There was still a potential path back to victory. But it wasn't what I was looking for. I was hoping to play one of the undefeated players, as I previously mentioned. However, I did have to win, and I also had to win big. And Ian was playing a pretty interesting vampire counts list that I will... in fact, I think we talked about on stream, but I will talk about again in a second. What we were doing was we were playing flank attack. So flank attack is an interesting one. It was, I think, slightly tweaked from the main rulebook, where it's just a case of you have to put one unit in one of your flanks that you allocate between 15% and 35% of your army, so it couldn't just be one unit of war dogs or something like that. It had to be at least one non-character unit, and it couldn't be your general. So I did put some stuff in my right-hand flank. My opponent put something in his left-hand flank, so we were matched off. It was just a case of, I wanted to put a Warpfire Dragon there, so it didn't matter too much. And also, I knew that I wanted to be able to sort of wing round. I'd done a false deployment on my left, or I'd stacked more heavily to the right, but put some things on the left to make it look like it was still going to be somewhere I focused my efforts on. So flank attack, you don't get the +1, obviously. So this came down to dice a little bit more than I was maybe comfortable with, because getting turn 1 against this army was going to be absolutely huge. Now, I believe I did talk about this list before on the stream last Tuesday. If I remember correctly, I was asking why Ian didn't have the Drakenhof banner in the Graveguard, and it was so that people would actually charge them. That was an interesting adaptation that he went with. I think with this list, I'd still put the Drakenhof banner in there, but I don't think it made a big difference to the game, so it was interesting to play around with. Ian was running double Necromancer, one level 4 Necromancer, and then double level 1 Necromancers. A single White Lord to unlock the Graveguard that was also the BSB. There was a Strigoi Ghoul King with the Ogre Blade, who, if I was going to let him get into combat, was going to carve chunks out of me. So, got to make sure you don't let him get into combat. Cairn Wraith as well, because you do need that to... In fact, no, there was nothing to unlock. It was just a Cairn Wraith in there. It's an ethereal character. I think it's a cute little bit of tech if you've got the spare points. Normally you don't, but obviously we haven't got a lot of the normal stuff, because the Master Necromancer was on a zombie dragon and not on the Mortis engine. I think this is a non-optimal choice, but it was interesting to see him play around with and how Ian used it. I didn't dislike it. I think you could do that pretty comfortably and not feel like you were, limiting your ability to win. Obviously, Vampire Count's one of the better armies, and this is a 0 scream list. So if you're going to play Vampire Counts in your local group, but you don't want to ruin people's day, maybe this is a direction you go in. So what is the direction? Rezzing. This is a list that is impossible to chew through because there are so many wounds. The weak link in my eyes is the unit of 6 Blood Knights. They are smaller than you'd like them to be, because if you're going to try and res things back to full, when you've only got 6 models, that is maybe a little bit of a problem. But the way that it works is, I think there are 4 different ways that you can res. The Strigoi Ghoul King has Dark Acolyte. You've got the Master Necromancer, who can res twice. Oh no, sorry, just the once. And then you've got the 2 Acolytes that can res once as well. If they're in range, if the Corpse Cart is in range of the unit being res, on a 3+, you get an additional wound back. So even the dragon can get healed up to full pretty quickly. But yeah, it's just a lot of infantry, basically. 29 Graveguard, 2 units of zombies that very quickly got up to max, and then the Blood Knights as well. Blood Knights have been upgraded to have the terror-causing rule, Supernatural Horror, on the Castellan, and otherwise full command, but no magic banners or anything like that. Now, this is one that I failed to get pictures of at the start of the game, which is a real shame, because it was nice to see Ian's army. Some nice, the classic Goblin Green bases definitely feel nostalgic, and then some lovely zombies in there as well. I think he said that they were the Lost Kingdoms skeletons when I asked about the Graveguards. I really like them. Good models, and obviously some good stuff in there as well, Zombie Dragon. But the way that it worked is I won the roll-off. I went first. And my game plan coming into this was I was going to pick off all of the Necromancers, the Ethereal Caster, the Corpse Cart. I was going to get all of those characters in the first 3 turns through Pillar of Fire. That was the game plan. And then I rolled my spells. And I didn't roll a single Pillar of Spells. And between 5 spells known and 4 spells known, not getting a single Pillar of Fire, I believe is a 5.6% chance. So I said, all right, cool, we're doing things differently. Gritted my teeth, and I went with double Hammer Hand, which ended up being pivotal, honestly. I think Hammer Hand is something that you should be taking to vampires more often. Obviously, they do have a good dispel threat a lot of the time, but if you can tie it up, you're not going to be too worried about that, and you just need the extra output. Every wound you do that's unsaved is effectively 2 wounds when it comes to crumble, so you want to be doing as much damage as possible. This is my turn 1. As you can see, the game plan had to adapt, and the game plan became, I'm going to try and divide and conquer. So, both units of Chaos Warhounds, I did remember to Vanguard them here, which is very important, and then I marched them forwards with their 21-inch move in marching column, making sure that when Ian charged, he was going to be charging in odd directions. Now, there was a little bit of a problem here because, as you can see, Ian has got a Cairn Wraith in the centre, and the Cairn Wraith does cause terror, which I hadn't considered. I think this was still the right move to go for, but the Cairn Wraith meant that I was going to have to take terror tests when he did declare charges. So I move up here. As you can see, the Marauders are in the centre. I was hoping that Ian would get sloppy with his positioning and I'd be able to charge them into some sort of Necromancer in the centre. It didn't end up happening, but I wasn't upset about it. And Ian had res some zombies in the centre as well, which I completely failed to blow up with the magic missiles, which is wild, because there were only 3 of them. Over here on the right, you can see the Blood Knights, are over on the right, and I had parked 2 dragons in front of them. This is the issue with this sort of list. This is 310 points plus a banner, so 360 points effectively. Unless you keep it safe, it's going to be the only thing my dragon can comfortably chew through. Yes, you could potentially challenge me out, but I can always kill it in 2 rounds of combat because you can only res 1 of those times. Or if I've got a double dragon, such as the Warpfire Dragon here, I can comfortably kill them in 1 round of combat because you can't challenge both of these characters. On the right-hand side, I'd moved my big Night Bus up along with the Dragon Ogre Shartak, just trying to position to get into the Graveguard because they're the next big point sink. And also one of the things, there's only 1 unit on the right-hand flank protecting all the characters, where there's 2 on the left, so I wanted to try and chew through the Graveguard as fast as possible, hit him hard, hit him fast, see if I could get him done. Combat went well. Ian decided not to charge me, which was wise, because if he had, I'd have just killed them on his turn and then turned around to charge something else. So it took me until turn 2 to finish them off and then test to restrain. Warpfire Dragon failed its test to restrain, so it ended up in this back corner. In fact, I think you can see it if I go to... This was a picture from Lewis. It was posting in the Hate Dragons WhatsApp group. If you're part of the TSN Arena crew, you may have seen this one before. But yeah, you can see in the background the Warpfire Dragon way off in the weeds, not doing anything. But I had crunched them, and I had managed to separate out the unit. I did get a... How did I do this? I think I baited with the Marauders here. By the by, the Graveguard did charge forwards. I was out of range. They didn't overrun into me, but I was positioned so effectively there was little to no support for them, and I was able to get all of my forces into them, which is obviously not what Ian wanted. Over on the left-hand side here, you can see the Cairn Wraith and the zombies have charged after the wolves that were on the left, and now the Marauders over there baiting for the next turn, just making sure if Ian doesn't charge, I'm blocking the wheel, because I don't want those zombies to be tying up my units. They're providing so much combat rares and just wounds that are hard to chip through, in terms of quantity, not in terms of quality. So, yeah, this is a... I felt good about this. I felt like I'd played quite well. The Zombie Dragon over here on the right is backwards because Ian was trying to keep it in range of the Blood Knights and the centre of the unit. However, it does fly, so it's not really too out of position. Maybe it would have been better to use it as a bully piece in this game, but the problem with that is as soon as the general dies, you're in for a world of hurt. So I am set up here to get some nice combo charges, and yes, there we go. I'd set up what I felt like was a big brain play. Ian had set up some blocking troops here with some raised dead. I had done a charge, and what I wanted to do was get the charge in with the Shartak into the zombie dragon and use that to prevent him from being able to cast any spells, dispel any spells, mostly dispel, because the way I sequenced it, I wanted to try and get in here and do like double hammer hand. It didn't end up working, but that was just because I completely whiffed my rolls with my great weapon. A Shartak did a grand total of 1 wound to some zombies, which is not ideal. I found that he really underperformed for me all weekend. Small sample size. I think he's still very good. I just wasn't impressed with what he managed to do with his 4 attacks and 2 stomps. 6 attacks in theory. Just very rarely did as much damage as you'd want him to, and I failed a lot of saves. So next turn he does end up in combat with the zombie dragon. But yeah, you can see the game plan here. Basically, I'd got stuff in the front that can challenge out anything in the front there. The dragon is in the front arc as well. No, sorry. At this point, it's in the side arc. Next turn, it's in the front arc when this unit gives ground. And yeah, over a couple of turns, I do manage to grind down this unit. And I think the next picture is... there's the Kenwraith chasing the direwolves. Yes, here you can see things have overran. The dragon is now in combat with some zombies. This is, I ended up in the middle of the board over here. Only had a couple of targets. I declared a charge into a necromancer. It fled. I rerouted into the unit zombies. Yada yada. And I'm set up here in the flank of the other dragon in case I want to go for it. I was also firing some magic missiles at it, but it didn't really scratch the hide. And that's that. I didn't take a picture. There was a moment towards the end of the game where there was the zombie dragon in combat here with this unit. It was the next turn. And in the rear of it was the Chaos Lord on dragon and also the Warpfire dragon. So between all of the wounds that I did to it, through its crown, Crown of the Damned, the 4 ward save that gives you stupidity, I had turned that off with the Warpfire dragon. My Dragon Lord had done 4 to 6 wounds, something like that. I had a huge amount of combat res. Rear charge, triple close order, standard. My opponent had no combat res, didn't really do any wounds back. I think I want to say I crumbled it for 1.5 times its entire wound pool. But this was good. This was a very thinky game for me because I knew that it wasn't enough to win. It was enough I had to win big. And after the game, I did end up with a 19-1 victory. Really enjoyed playing against Ian. Again, shout out to Ian for putting money behind the bar for everyone. Really generous of him. But it was a great game to test how this list plays against a more sort of attrition combat list. Made me think and have to use some sort of redirecting, make Ian split up his army to deal with me sort of tactics. So at the end of round 4, I was positioned reasonably well. There was now only one undefeated player, which was Pip and his vampire counts. I had, there were 2 players who had lost recently. Tom had just lost to the Orcs and Goblins player, Nicholas. And Nicholas, I believe, had lost in round 3 in retrospect. Yeah, something along those lines. Basically, there was one undefeated player, and that was Pip. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, so the only way for me to win this event realistically is to get the game into Pip and then beat him big. Because that was going to be... He was 6 points ahead of me, so I had to beat him. I think it would have to have been a 17-3. No, a 14-6 would have done it in terms of the gap between scores. But by the by, I had to beat him by a good chunk, make sure I got the points, but also outstrip my opponents who were in the 4-1 bracket by the end of the tournament. Coming into game 5, I didn't get the pairing I wanted, and I thought that the tournament might be out my hands. So looking at it, I was doubly disappointed and once happy, partially because the matchup was not one that, in my eyes, put the winning the event in my hands. Secondly, it's a very difficult matchup because it was the Goblin Poison Shooting Brick. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then once because I enjoy playing against Nicholas. So I was pretty okay to see that. It was always a fan of playing against him. He's a lovely chap. And I've played him, I think, 3 times now. I'm currently 2-1. So Nicholas keeps pulling it back. Next time we play, I'm sure he'll beat me. He's a very solid player, and is, as I said, a joy to play against him. Looking at the mission, we had the Plain of Le Saffron Walden. And what was this mission? It is open battle, because, as Lewis points out, by the time you get to game 5, your brain's a little bit melted, which is fair. And I think this is an interesting approach, that normally you see TOs run open battle as round 1. Seeing it as round 5, it's kind of fun. I don't mind it at all. On to the lists then. Nicholas is playing the dreaded, the fated teleporting poison shooting brick that orcs and goblins can bring. Now, this event does have TMP capped, so each model can only move 12 inches, which is a definite nerf to the list. I think it's still good played with it, but that is something to keep in mind, so that's why Nick isn't able to escape in the later. I'll show you when we get to it. But looking at the list, it's I think it's fairly standard, I would say. We've got a level 4 Orc Weird Knob who's got Elementalism. This character is able to, you're casting at +4. There's Lore Familiar on there, so you're definitely getting TMP, which is the important one. You've also got Plague of Rust in there as well. Not too much to say. Then there is a BSB, Big Boss, with a Wallopers One-Hit Wonder and, Light Armor Shield. Honestly, the One-Hit Wonder is better defense than the Light Armor Shield, because it's a once per game, you get 3 attacks at strength 10, AP 3, I think it is, with first strike as well. So really solid there. You're going to be doing a lot of damage, or you have the potential to do a lot of damage into enemy infantry characters. It's not going to protect you against dragons, but, it's there. You might as well go for it. There are double level 4 Night Goblin Wizards. These both have War Magic. One has the glowy green amulet for a 2-up Dispel if you target the unit. If you roll a 1, it breaks. The other one has got the Idol of Gork for plus 3-inch range on its spells, which is really nice for the hexes, and it gives you a once per turn reroll on the Idol as well. Also, both of them have a single Fungus Wine, which is you take it, you roll it on your unmodified leadership. If you pass, you get Unbreakable, which is very solid against terror causes. Obviously, I'm playing dragons. This list is designed to prey on dragons, so that's exactly what you want to see in here. Finally, there was a Night Goblin War Boss, because Nick has got 4 units of Night Goblins. He had to go for 4 characters, and this has got a Giant Cave Squig with Great Weapon Shield, Light Armor, and the Ruby Ring of Ruin. I wasn't super impressed by this model, honestly. I think going down to 3 units of Night Goblins and just 3 characters is probably better. I think that would be absolutely fine. I'm also of the mind that you should probably try and fit a Wyvern in here, but it's a very different build if you do that. So that's the list. Obviously, very solid up until this point. Nick is 3-1, and looking like he's got a good matchup here. Into core, there are a lot of Night Goblins, as you might expect. That is 151. There's a big brick of 61 with poison, with netters, and then the other units are 30. Every unit has 3 fanatics, so this was a 12 fanatic list, which was so brutal, absolutely disgusting to play against. And I don't mean that negatively in terms of you shouldn't have done it, but when I put my models on the board, I was like, okay, you just got to get through a couple of turns of all of your models dying, and then see if we can make it from there. In special, there was a unit of 7 Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, which are pretty solid for their points, and then a couple of Doom Divers as well, which are fantastic. Now, here's the problem. Let's have a look at the board. Looking at the deployment here, you can see that there is a big ruin on both sides. There is a garrisonable building, which can hold up to 20 infantry model, so neither of us had a unit that could go in it. But space is a little bit limited on that top-hand side, and Nick won the roll-off, and Nick chose that side. Now, these ruins here were line-of-sight blocking from the rules pack. The QR code, you could scan it would tell you what all of the bits of terrain were. So Nick didn't want to give me something that I could bunker my entire army in and try and hide from the poison shooting, because I definitely could have done that, and I could have tried to force a 10-10 draw or something like that. I don't know that I would have gone for that, realistically. I think Nick would be able to catch up with me. Obviously, he can get close. I could potentially threaten by leaving my dragons peeking around the side, so if he teleports close enough to shoot, I then, if he doesn't kill them, get to make a charge. But, there's a couple of options there. Given that I'm in a singles event, I wouldn't have taken this play pattern. I'm always going to try and force the victory, because if you end up second or if you end up 10th, it doesn't really matter that much if you're going for the win. Wins mean something. Everything after that is... and I should say, this is from my perspective. This is me driving myself to be the best player I can be. If I'm not first, I'm just one of the other positions. So a second or third would be cool, but I'm pushing for that first place every time. So in singles, what that means is I'm going to be taking the aggressive line, which is what I did here. Deployment, I put both dragons behind here. There wasn't any way that Nick could teleport forwards to get in range of me to shoot them, but I also just thought, why bother risking it? It doesn't put me very much further back, and I had a plan in mind for how I wanted to deploy them anyway. Everything else was set up as so the knights were behind. Again, they can't be shot, but let's not risk it. Both units of Warhounds were deployed here, and then we've got the Marauders and the Shartak in the centre. And I've gone very centrally. Nick has spread out quite a lot just because he needs the board space. I win the roll-off, and this is pretty big, in my opinion. Not allowing Nick to take up board space is very valuable. I think I had less drops, so I got the +1 and then rolled a 6 anyway. So it was a solid start to the tournament, to the game. But yes, here we go. You can see what I've gone for. Basically, I've vanguarded forwards with the wolves, and then I've full marched forwards as well, and I'm blocking up the space as much as possible. Obviously, he's going to kill them with fanatics, but what it does is it limits his ability to teleport. He can't end within 6 inches of any enemy models, so if he wants to go for the TMP, he has to make sure he kills all of them, which is honestly a little harder to do than you'd expect with the D6 random hits. If you leave any models alive in this front squad specifically, that's going to really pin you in place, which is a problem. So he does release some fanatics on his turn, but not all of them because he needs to save them for the charge in the following turn. If he releases them all here, I can just play my time, back off for a turn. He then gets the ability to teleport, but he loses all of his fanatic defensive power, and I've got a lot more agency in the game. So he has to drip feed me fanatics. So I think he releases, I want to say 3 in total, and doesn't end up fully killing them here. So he's fully pinned in place in terms of, casting his travel mystical pathways. What it also means as well is I've walked forwards, I've arcane urgency'd myself forwards as well to try and pillar of fire. I've dropped it in a way that I could get them over the head of the wizard here, who was not in the unit. This was a deliberate choice, and it was the correct choice. Even though I had pillar of fire, Nick decided to make the conscious decision to risk taking the pillar of fire hits because he knew he had dispel threats, so if I got close to cast them, he potentially could dispel it. His wizard's T5, he feels pretty okay about surviving, which I agree with. If he was in the unit here, what would happen is I'd move my dragons up, but I'd put them just sort of like directly in front here, so they'd be out of range of, the wizard's ability to Plague of Rust, effectively. So I'd feel very comfortable just standing in front of him and going, what are you going to do? In this case, I've set it up so both dragons are out of range of most of the spells. They are in range to charge, and I measured it out for a while. Nick wasn't able to move his unit away far enough, unless both these units were dead, and then he was able to TMP. But what it meant was, I was pinning him in place here. He wasn't able to get away from this. You can't wheel backwards or anything like that. He had limited mobility to wheel. I was always going to be able to charge him. Same on the Warpfire Dragon here as well, and then this unit behind is also set up to charge, because I just needed to saturate my threats, basically. Everyone here is in range to charge my opponent if I want to. Even the Marauder Horsemen, who I didn't end up charging, but they were in range to do so. So, goes over to Nick's turn. Nick tries to cast a lot of spells. He tries to cast the Plague of Rust onto the Chaos Knights in front of him, because he doesn't have a better tower to put it on. They are magic resist 2. I've got a level 4 dispel. I stop that one. He manages to get off Evil Sun Shining, which is +1 AP and reroll 1s to hit, which is nice. It's a very good buff to have. But he also, and that's it. He also gets off Itchy Nuisance into the dragon over here on the right-hand flank, the Chaos Lord Dragon. That takes me down to T5, but I've got a 1-round buff, which puts me up to T6, so it doesn't really feel like it makes much difference. A lot of the stuff that's going into me is Strength 3. Obviously, for Fanatics, it's quite nice, but I'm not super worried about that. I've got a lot of wounds. So, after that point, I've pretty much shut down his magic phase. I think he also does fail to cast. He miscasts something. Just on the lowest casting value, I dispel it. That's the end of his casting phase, and he doesn't get to do any more spells on his turn 1. So a little bit punishing there. Doesn't even get to use his Ruby Ring of Ruin, which wouldn't have done much anyway, because he couldn't see the the wolves here, he was only able to throw it into the unit of Chaos Knights, but doesn't manage to get it off. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable here, and I know that my game plan has to be just full send it. I've set it up, go over to my turn 2, and Nick puts out all of the remaining fanatics. And then I have to charge. So I think the next picture is what happens after my charge. Look at my army now. Look at how many models there are. Look at how many models are positioned to charge. And it goes very poorly. It goes very poorly. So fanatics come out and everything declares charges. This Shartak here declares a charge into the big unit of Night Goblins. The Warpfire Dragon and the other dragon both declare a charge into the unit of Night Goblins, I should say. The unit at the front here declares a charge in. They do have Oaken Shield, and because I'm making the charge, I've gone for, it's time to start rolling on the Gaze of the Gods table. I just want my sorcerers to do as much damage in combat as possible. So I'm really plumbing for that. I did go for Blue Fire in this game, which comes up later on. I think it was the right choice, but they were always going to be sort of like a melee bunker. The one wolf that survived all of the fanatics last turn, pinning them in place for TMP. That model is charges in the flank here as well, just because you may as well. You've got to try and do something with it. I needed to clear some space up as well, because I was trying to get the Shartak in. But Shartak fails the charge, Lord fails the charge, and the Warpfire Dragon dies to the stand and shoot. So, not feeling great about things, honestly. At this point, I was looking at it and going, cool, game's over. At least it's going to be a fast one. It's turn 2, and that's it. Combat happens. I believe I declare a charge with my unit champion, or I declare a challenge with my unit champion. My opponent accepts with his unit champion, which I think costs him down the line, honestly. I win on combat res just a little bit, or no, in fact, I lose, I should say. No, sorry. This game was very taxing on the brain, and a lot of things happened. I won combat first turn round because I had first charge. After that point, it didn't really matter. He'd managed to kill in combat all 4 of the knights, so all I had left were a couple of the chaps there, but I had 1 combat and I was sort of tying him up, which was pretty big. Managed to keep 1 in combat there. Oh, we'll go back. Basically, onto his next turn, what happened was, because of positioning of fanatics and the way that Give Ground works, you stop as soon as you hit an enemy model, you don't go through them. Fanatics are a unit. There's nothing saying that there's not. I've had this discussion now. We've done a deep dive to see if there's anything stopping it, but effectively I used the fanatics behind me, and the fanatics were behind my sorcerers, and that stopped them from falling back, or stopped one of them from falling back, which meant that the Night Goblins were tied up in combat for turn 2, and that was the thing that swung it back in my favor, because I was in a position where Nick needs to be able to shoot me. If he can shoot my Lord, he does probably 6 wounds to it, and then I charge him, and he does another 6 to 8 wounds. Lord dies. Game over. But coming into my turn 3, after Nick's not able to do very much, and also a lot of the fanatics killed themselves on this turn, you can see here, I have 4 models left in my army. This is the start, I believe this is the end of my turn 4. Sorry, end of my turn 3. But I'm not a body language expert. I'm not claiming that you can look at this and be like, oh, Nick can tell. Nick was, dejected is the wrong word. Nick was nervous, and I was feeling comfortable. I've never felt more in control of a game where my opponent has over 150 models. And I have 4 left. So at the end of turn 3, basically, I've come in here, and this is one of the best games of Warhammer I've ever played. So I'm going to just speed run through some of the things that went well, some of the decisions I made. Again, the Fanatic here has ended up in a slightly awkward place for my opponent. So when the Dragon Ogre Shartak loses combat, he hits the Fanatic and he stops there, which is really nice for me because it just ties up that unit. Not that this unit has anywhere to go, but because of the width of the big unit here, if I ever manage to break it in combat and send it backwards, it's going to go off the board, as long as the unit of Night Goblins in front are tied up in where they are. So if I can break them, they're going to run away. Spoiler alert, I don't break them, not for a couple of turns. So I'm looking at this, and obviously this unit of Night Goblins can bring way more combat res than I can do in a challenge. And Nick does have to start feeding me characters to cap the amount of combat res that he can get and then still win with his musician. But he's got close order, 3 ranks, including Horde. He's got a banner, he's got a war banner, he's got a battle standard. He's got something else in there as well. I think he gets up to, I want to say 9. It's very high, like 8 or 9, something along those lines. And it's very difficult for me to win. And knowing that, I cast my first Purifier over here between 2 Fanatics, so I can mop them up, get rid of the threats to my lone characters, who are over here, respectively. And the other one I cast behind my dragon. Now, why is that important? Pillar of Fire counts as dangerous terrain. What happens when you give ground? When you give ground, you stop as soon as you hit terrain. So, with that in mind, I've put the Pillar of Fire behind my own model. Obviously, I need it to stand still for combat. I do my combat and then it goes to Nick's turn, then it moves. So this is going to pin me in place. The only way that somehow Nick gets out of combat is if he breaks and flees or falls back in good order and I don't catch him. That's the only way that he's going to get out of combat here. Or I guess if I lose combat and then I flee. But at this point, I've rolled Apotheosis. I'm up to leadership 10. I'm probably not going to roll away. So this ended up working out perfectly. I felt very big brain. I lost combat by a little bit. I gave ground, but I didn't move. Nick stays in combat with me. And then just over successive turns, I grind down the list. Let's see if there's anything else here. So, yeah, you can see here, the dragon is making, I was going to say short work. The dragon is making very long work of the enemy unit of Night Goblins. But by the time it gets to, I think it's the Nick's turn 5, I end up chasing them off the board. And then I charge into the stuff in the back lines, and it ends up being a 15-5 victory, despite looking very, very ropey for me at the on my turn 2 when I failed the charge with my dragon. My other dragons died, but it was a really, really tense game, really fun. Felt like I made a lot of the right choices. There was one big mistake I made, which was I tested a restrain with the Dragon Lord. And then I rolled on the Favor of the Gods table after I had used both my Gaze of the Gods. Yeah, that was not smart, because not only did I allow my opponent to stand and shoot me, although he had a low number of models, it was unlikely that it was going to do much, but it meant that I didn't break them a turn earlier because he was able to stack some combat res there. I got Stupidity, and then I failed Stupidity on one of the turns, so I just ended up, after I killed the big brick, the dragon just hung around like a mope, not doing something for one turn, and it cost me a little bit, which was a problem. But great game. Nick's lovely to play against. We had a good chat about the lists afterwards as well. Something I didn't say at the time, I think I prefer a bigger unit of Night Goblins. If you go back to here, I think if he hadn't run 3 other units as well, and he put sort of all 90 into one unit, he's got a little bit more room in his deployment zone. He can play a little bit more loose with them, does more damage as well. But this is the list version that is better against Bretonnians and not as good against dragons. But the list already beats dragons just sort of by existing. So I think it makes sense that he's not gone too heavy into beating dragons when the list is already so good against them. That did take us to the end of the event. As you can see here, I'm not smiling. Not because I'm not pleased, just because my brain was leaking out my ears. Both games I played had taken a lot of brain space. But that was it. That took us to the end. I did get this nice certificate as well. And great event. I had a lot of fun. Am I going to play Chaos again? Probably not. Obviously, I need to be getting more reps in with High Elves. Going to be playing those for England in WCC in the summer. So I need to get more practice in with them. But there were a lot of transferable skills, I'll say. I was playing the Warriors of Chaos list like it was, like it was my Dark Elves, basically. So a lot of fun. Warpfire Dragon, absolutely nuts. If that was a neutral creature, I would take that in absolutely every list. It was disgustingly good. I was a little concerned when I first looked at it, and I was like, oh, it's only a T6. Well, not T6. It's only a 6-up dragon with only a 4-up armor save. Is that going to be enough? That thing's disgusting. It's so good. Chaos are eating good at the moment. If you like chaos, make hay while the sun is shining, because you can go and absolutely rinse events, in my opinion, taking a Warfire Dragon and a Lord on Dragon as well. I want to play around with a different character setup. Maybe I'll play that for some sort of, I don't know, some sort of just on-stream game, something like that. But you could go Sorcerer on Dragon, Lord on Dragon, Warfire Dragon. You just get really limited on the upgrades. I think you have to go basically naked on both models, which is not ideal. Thank you for watching. Thank you for getting to the end of the video. If you've reached this point and you haven't already, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, a subscription if you haven't done those things. It just helps me get seen by more people, boost me up in the algorithm, all of the stuff that the YouTubers do like to say. If you would like to support me in my goal to become a full-time YouTuber, I would absolutely appreciate that. You can become a member below. There are various perks to those, name at the end of the videos, all that good stuff, but it also unlocks some VIP areas in Discord if you become a Longbeard or Ground Knight tier supporter. Those VIP sections are the only parts that are locked away in Discord. You don't have to be a member to join the Discord. I'd recommend that you should. We've got about 450, 500 people on there. It's a great place for discussion, a lot of fun. I do try and chime in as much as possible. And it's also where the Fix My List show lists are put, and also if you are one of the Ground Knight or Longbeard tier supporters, where you participate in choosing which list I play in the monthly Pick My List series.